Is that okay? We'll go ahead and call to order the Longmont Planning and Zoning Commission July 17th, 2024 meeting. First item is roll call.
Chair Poland. Here. Commissioner Saunders. Here. Commissioner Lang. Here. Commissioner Boone. Here. Commissioner Lukacs. Here. Commissioner Popkin. Here. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Next is communications from Planning and Development Services, Grant Penland.
No specific comms, other than good to see y'all.
Okay, next item is public invited to be heard. Jane is getting the sheet to see if anybody signed up. This is for items that are not on our schedule today and not coming before us in the short term under quasi-judicial. So if you have something that you would like to talk to us about, you are invited to step forward. Seeing nobody step forward, I'll go ahead and close out the public invited to be heard. Next is approval of minutes for the June 26th, 2024 meeting, and I will make note that you did not have to be in attendance. If you've reviewed the minutes, you can go ahead and vote for approval or changes. So, are there any comments? Commissioner Popkin.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair. I had actually 3 very, very friendly amendments that I submitted to Jane via email in advance. I think I copied you on those as well, Chair Poland. So I just wanted to read them for the record. I understand that those have already been included into the minutes. And so I wanted to read them for the record in case anyone has any questions or concerns about that. On page 15 of the minutes, this is when in the last meeting I was disclosing an affiliation with my employer who had consulted on a previous project for that developer, not the current project. And so I wanted to specify that, as I stated on in the record at the time, but just wasn't captured in the minutes, currently reads, Commissioner Popkin asked if Rocky Mountain Institute was involved in an advisory or consulting role in Modern West 2. End of sentence. And I wanted to add, comma, given RMI's past involvement in Modern West 1, which was the context relevant for that, and is stated in the actual recording. Then on page 16, let me make sure I'm getting this right. Yes, page 16 of the minutes, that's lines 3 to 6. There is a not or a negative that is missing from the discussion about the airport and lighting and whether that's safety. So currently, it currently reads, Mike wouldn't think of it that way. He would say it could be a little higher and still obtain a determination of no hazard, but it may require lighting. It is low enough that it does. It is low enough that it does require lighting, and that should be does not require lighting. And then page 18 of the minutes, lines 33 to 34, currently read, at the end of the day, it is a choice whether people want to rent or buy. Which is a true statement that I stand by, but in that context, the rest of the recording reflects that the spirit of that, as we're capturing and paraphrasing, should be whether people want to live there, not a specific choice, rent or buy. So changing rent or buy to live there, because it wasn't a question of renting or buying in that moment, it was a question of physical location choice. So those were the 3 amendments there. Happy to recite any of those for the record or for any commissioners if you have questions.
I don't have a question, and I do know that Jane has already made those changes, and they have been submitted. Do we have any motions, other comments? Commissioner Saunders.
I move we approve the June 26th meeting minutes.
Commissioner Boone.
I would second that.
We have a motion, we have a second. No further discussion. Jane, let's go ahead and take a vote.
Commissioner Saunders.
Yes.
Commissioner Lang.
Aye.
Commissioner Boone.
Aye.
Chair Poland.
Aye.
Commissioner Lukacs.
Aye.
Commissioner Popkin. Aye. Chairman, that passes 6-0.
Thank you very much. Next is the public hearings. The first item and only item today is the project title, Ziggy's Coffee Conditional Secondary Use Site Plan. Presenting is Jennifer Hewitt Epperson, Planning and Development Services.
Good evening, members of the commission. So we are here this evening to consider an application for a conditional secondary use for Ziggy's Coffee with drive-through service. I do want to note that there is an error on the general information section of the staff report. The correct zoning of the property, mixed-use neighborhood, as it's spelled out, is listed, but the incorrect abbreviation was used. So this site is Zone Mixed-Use Neighborhood, or MUN. I think I just transposed a few letters of zoning districts there. So with that, this 1.8 acre site is located at the southwest corner of Airport Road and Clover Basin Drive in the Renaissance area. The subject property is one of 3 adjacent properties, parcels fronting Airport Road, that are zoned MUN. The Vera West apartments are located immediately to the west on a parcel zoned residential multifamily. Then to the north of Clover Basin is a mix of attached and detached single-family units zoned RMN. On the east side of Airport Road is a single-family subdivision zoned residential single-family. To the northeast of this property is largely an unincorporated Boulder County enclave. There is a little sliver here of public facilities. It is a utility facility owned by Northern Water. I'll also note that Clover Basin Drive in this area, it is a median separated roadway. So basically you got one way, you can go right in, right out onto Clover Basin Drive. So on Envision Longmont, this property is designated as neighborhood center. Neighborhood centers are intended for to offer a mix of supporting services and small-scale commercial retail uses for surrounding residential neighborhoods. As detailed in the staff report, the proposed use is consistent with the provisions of Envision Longmont. So in terms of general project information, the applicant will give a more detailed description of what they are proposing, but I'm going to give an overview. They are proposing a Ziggy's Coffee Cafe with drive-through service. It is a proposed 1,800 square foot single-family building that would include interior seating as well as outdoor patio seating in addition to the drive-through. So restaurants with drive-through service do require approval as a conditional secondary use in the MUN district. So the applicant will have a much nicer version of the site plan than this, but this is really just kind of illustrate the general layout. So the applicant is proposing driveway stacking for 13 vehicles, which exceeds the 8 spaces required by code. Additionally, the driveway is situated in such a way that spillover from excess vehicles onto adjacent roadways is highly unlikely. Patio seating would be available on the south side of the building. Access to the property would be from Palladio Court and Bramante Drive, both of which are private drives within the Renaissance community. There are shared access points onto both Clover Basin and Airport Road, which are limited to right-in, right-out movements. So this property does have some pretty interesting constraints, notably on the eastern portion of the property, approximately the eastern third-ish, contains an 80-foot wide pipeline easement held by Northern Water, as well as a significant drainage easement on the western portion of the property. A large setback from Clover Basin Drive is needed to accommodate existing stormwater facilities for this area. And I will note that the southern portion of the site is contemplated for future development, but is not part of this application. If these southern parcels that are indicated for possible future development do come in for proposed development, if this site plan were approved, they would need to come in and do a site plan amendment to accommodate those properties. So as noted previously, there is that 80-foot wide easement held by Northern Water on this property. The planning agreement between Northern Water and the City of Longmont includes limits on the types of development and plant materials within this easement. The applicant and staff have coordinated with Northern Water representatives throughout this process to ensure that their requirements are being met in terms of plant material and what is allowed within that easement. So in terms of secondary uses, this site is part of an MUN district consisting of 3 parcels. There are 2 undeveloped parcels in this district, and the center parcel has been developed and contains a neighborhood scale commercial building that is occupied by primary uses in the MUN district, notably a tap room, ale house, a veterinary clinic, and a liquor store. Development of this property with a proposed conditional secondary use would still leave ample space for primary uses within this MUN strip. So I'm not going to go through this full list, just to note that MUN does allow a variety of uses by right as primary uses, including those listed here. Secondary and conditional uses are a bit more limited and include restaurants with drive-through services as currently proposed. So in terms of the development review process, it's been in the process, including pre-application requirements since 2022. There was just a bit of time lag between some of the submittals, so that accounts for the length of time of this project. So at this point, I'd like to discuss the review criteria for all types of development, as well as conditional and secondary uses. Staff does find that the proposed Ziggy's coffee with drive-through service does meet the required review criteria. So the proposed Ziggy's meets the standards established for conditional and secondary uses in the Longmont Land Development Code and meets residential compatibility requirements and standards for drive-through service. Potential adverse impacts have been mitigated to the maximum practical extent. This site does include more than adequate stacking for the drive-through lanes, which are also sited and buffered in a manner that will minimize their visual impact, and also provides adequate customer and employee parking. EV and EV-ready spaces are provided as required in the Longmont Development Code and Colorado statutes. Additionally, there was a question about bicycle parking. There are 4 bicycle spaces provided, and that exceeds the requirement that 5% of parking spaces be, that basically there be bicycle parking equal to 5% or more of the provided parking spaces on the site for vehicles. So it does exceed that standard. So all applicable city standards will be met, including street and utility design. Adequate utilities are available to serve the proposed conditional use. The proposed development is compatible with surrounding properties in terms of site and building layout, design, and access. The proposed building is a single-story structure that meets residential compatibility standards established in the LDC. Access would be provided from interior private drives, as noted before, so you would not have direct access from this specific property onto the adjacent roadways. There will be no impacts to the natural environment, given that this property is in the middle of an area that is largely built out, and there are no natural features of note on the property. Again, as noted previously, there is no direct access to airport or Clover Basin, and the existing shared access points are limited to right in, right out, which improves safety. So the airport road exit, or the entrance onto Airport Road from Bramante Drive, is basically has that pork chop median that enforces the fact that you can only go right in and right out. And on the north side, again, Clover Basin does have a landscape median that, if you're crossing it, you got bigger problems. With that, let's see. Pardon me, sorry about that. Lost my spot here. So basically, all the transportation and utility infrastructure are in place to serve this project, like as it is part of. It would be infill in a largely built-out area. So the subject property is not within a riparian area, so this particular criterion, review criterion number 5, does not apply here. The proposed site plan does include a pedestrian path to an existing sidewalk on Bramante Drive that does provide a connection to Airport Road and would also provide additional connectivity throughout the Renaissance neighborhood. Additionally, bicycle racks, ADA accessible spaces, EV facilities are provided in accordance with our code. So in terms of conditional uses, these are uses that are those that on which specific conditions may be imposed to ensure compatibility and mitigate any potential adverse impacts. In the present case, the site has been designed in a manner that minimizes impacts and ensures compatibility with existing nearby residential areas. So in terms of secondary uses, they must meet 3 additional criteria. The subject property is intended for development with neighborhood scale commercial uses. No direct access, again, will be provided to either roadway. There is adequate capacity on roadways to accommodate additional traffic, though as noted in the traffic study and mentioned in the staff report, this type of use typically captures existing traffic rather than generating new trips. So it doesn't necessarily become its own destination. It's the type of use where people stop in on their way somewhere else while they're already on the road, if they're driving. So the proposed drive-through, as mentioned, does exceed code requirements. And additionally, this proposed building will include indoor and outdoor patio seating. The site includes pedestrian connectivity, bicycle parking. The nearest adjacent residential use is a 3-story multifamily development immediately to the west. So with all of these elements, we do find that the proposed secondary use is compatible with surrounding uses and potential adverse impacts would be mitigated. As described previously, the proposed Ziggy's Coffee is consistent with the goals and policies of Envision Longmont and is consistent with the neighborhood center land use category. The proposed use is also consistent with the purpose and intent of the MUN zoning district as well as development standards contained within the LDC. Additionally, it does, as mentioned previously, exceed requirements for proposed drive-through service as far as stacking, which will minimize those impacts as well. Finally, the MUN district in which this subject property is located contains a bit more than 5.5 acres. The parcel immediately south is developed with a neighborhood shopping center, but it only contains primary uses. The southernmost property in this district is undeveloped. So development of the subject 1.8-ish acre property and with a secondary use would result in less than 1/3 of this district being occupied by secondary uses and would not cause the district to exceed the 50% threshold that we have interpreted historically as the ceiling for secondary uses in a zoning district. It would not diminish the available supply of land available for primary uses either. One other thing to note is that the proposed Ziggy's Coffee would not occupy the entire site, and it is likely that the southern portion of the site will be developed for additional uses at some point in the future. Those could very well be primary uses, so it's very likely that this property does not entirely contain secondary uses either. So with that, staff does recommend approval of the proposed conditional use based on its compliance with the review criteria established in the Land Development Code, as well as its consistency with Envision Longmont. And with that, I will turn this over to the applicant to talk in more detail about the project. If I can figure out how to get to view. All right, turn this over to Chad August.
Good evening. Oh, jeez, sorry. Wowzers. Oh, okay. Good evening. My name's Chad August. I'm a licensed architect with MAH Architectural Group, and I was the project architect for this project. I have a brief little presentation here, so I'll read primarily from that. But Ziggy's Coffee is the epitome of a hometown organization, having been established right here in Longmont nearly 20 years ago. During that time, Ziggy's has worked very hard to establish a solid reputation based on customer service, brand consistency, and integration within the communities where they locate themselves. A fundamental component of their success and a critical part of their business operations, however, has always been the drive-through lane and the outstanding service and convenience that option affords them to provide their customers. For this reason, we are asking that the Plan Commission grant approval to the conditional use request allowing the drive-through lane for the proposed Ziggy's Coffee project located at Clover Basin Drive and Airport Road. As you can see from the site plan, a good deal of forethought was put into minimizing the visual impact of the drive-through lane and any negative connotations it may carry with it through the intentional building placement and the use of enhanced landscaping. Evergreen trees will offer the greatest level of year-round visual screening and have been focused at the areas with the highest amount of vehicles, being the entry into the drive-through, the order board, and the pickup windows. The balance of the drive-through lane remains highly landscaped to further reduce visual impact of the lane while simultaneously helping mitigate any negative effect of either noise or vehicle headlights, anything else to the surrounding areas. Additionally, an overhead canopy at the pickup window has been added to the building, which helps create a notable architectural feature of the building, ensuring visual interest to all four sides of the building, thus ensuring the building facade most closely associated with the drive-through lane is not seen as an afterthought, but rather as an integral part of the 360-degree design of the building. A couple other things. It is important to note that this location of Ziggy's Coffee will be a corporate owned and operated location. As I had noted before, the drive-through is an essential part of Ziggy's operational success, but with that said, it should also be noted that this location is primarily a cafe-style model with a focus on community integration and enhanced experience for dine-in patrons. The large patio with exterior seating has been provided to help complement the availability of the interior seating, which accommodates 43 seats. Additionally, a large overhead door is proposed, which provides a seamless opening and connection between the interior and exterior dining experiences to help just make it nicer. As Jennifer identified, bicycle parking is provided at the patio, as well as direct ADA accessible sidewalk connection to the patio in order to encourage a multimodal access to the facility. As was noted in the staff report, all other elements necessary to meet the requirements outlined in the land use code have been met, including the necessary car stack length associated with the drive-through, the number of allowable vehicles stacked without spilling over into public ways, the installation of both EV installed and EV ready parking stalls. Access to the site has been located off Bramante Drive and Palladio Court in order to minimize any concerns that may have arose from the impact of traffic onto the more heavily traveled Clover Basin and Drive and Airport Road. With that, I'd also like to introduce Michael Hunsinger with MAH, Brandon Knutson, Stephen Simon, and Chris Nils, representatives of the development team and the traffic engineer, should there be any specific questions that they can address more completely. So with that, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing item. As such, we will go ahead and open this up for public invited to be heard to comment on this. We do have one person who has signed up. We have Javon Beck. And when you come down, you have 5 minutes, and please state your name and address for the record.
Hey there, I'm Siobhan Beck, 2199 Step Drive here in Longmont. I'm the property manager at Vera West Apartments, that is just west of the proposed Ziggy location. I did grow up here in Longmont and have worked in property management for the past 27 years, and 20 of those years were spent working on that corner of town. I have had many discussions with prospective and current residents about what is proposed to go in those vacant lots. Anytime we discussed a coffee shop or specifically the Ziggy's being built, they have always been excited to have a coffee shop that close and excited at the notion that there may be a drive-through so they can get their coffee on their way to work. Having a drive-through coffee shop is much needed on our end of town. For me personally, during the last year, I have been in and out of a wheelchair, walker, currently in a cane. You don't realize how wonderful it is to have a drive-through and to have those pickup spots when you can't get around very easy. And the one thing that I have not been able to get on my on my side of town is coffee. So I think it would be incredible to have it there and to have the drive-through. And you've got a lot of people in the apartment complex that is just going to be so happy. So just wanted to let y'all know that.
Okay, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thanks.
I will go ahead and invite anybody else who would like to come down and say anything. You will have 5 minutes. Seeing nobody come forward, I'll go ahead and close out the public invited to be heard. We'll move forward to discussion, comments, questions from the commission. Commissioner Popkin, thank you.
I can kick things off. Thank you, Chair. Welcome to the applicant. Thanks for the business across town and for how you've set up. I have a couple quick questions for the applicant first. One clarifying question on just what's literally up in front of us here. Is this designed to scale? Like, is this showing the scale of the structure relative to other facilities or elements on the plan?
The building in plan
Yeah.
is scaled to everything else around it. Yes, sir.
Got it. So I'm just going to clarify this based on a public comment that we got, just to ask it out loud.
Sure.
There was a remark that the building is approximately the size of 6 parking spaces, and yet is supposed to host somewhere between 40 to 45. I forget if that's the exact number you just recited in your opening, but I just wanted to clarify, like, how that exactly works.
So the building itself is 1,865 square feet, has an 1865 square foot footprint. I have brought, and I apologize that I don't have it in the thing, but I can certainly bring it up and you can pass along a floor plan that does show what the prototypical floor plan of this building is. The interior seating capacity is 43.
Seating capacity?
Yep, 43 seats, which then there's additionally the barista area in the back of house area.
Got it. I would actually love to see the floor plan. Thank you. Good. Thank you for clarifying that. While you're up here, just for my own understanding of how Ziggy's thinks about its other establishments in Longmont and for everyone else's awareness, can you just clarify, like, what other types of layouts or establishments Ziggy's operates across town? I think there are 3 others that are operating
Sure.
within city limits.
I'll speak generically to it, and then I'll probably turn it over to Brandon if that's okay. But
It's totally okay.
So Ziggy's Coffee had a 624 square foot model that was a drive-through only facility, and then they had 2 versions of a cafe model that were roughly 1,800 square feet each, that featured interior use. The 624 square foot prototypical models have been phased out in preference to an 865 square foot model. But so they generally have a drive-through only and a cafe. And obviously this is a cafe style too.
This is kind of a hybrid in effect, right?
Yeah, the cafes will always have a drive-through associated with them.
Does the cafe at 3rd and Main or 4th and Main have a drive-through associated with it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome. Brandon, is it?
Brandon, yeah.
Thanks.
Owner and founder of Ziggy's and operator of this one.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. So the 3 I have in Longmont now are 17th and Hover has about 380 square feet, which is way too small. We're making it work. South Main, we've upgraded to 500 square feet, almost. And downtown Longmont is not quite 1,800 square feet.
Okay.
So just kind of for perspective, you've been in that store. This is actually bigger than the downtown location, so there'll be ample seating in there.
Got it. And that one doesn't have a drive-through, correct? That's
Doesn't have a
just the
drive-through. That
cafe.
was-
This would be kind of a hybrid model where it's a cafe plus the drive-through.
Yeah, of our 92 locations, that's the only store that doesn't have a drive-through.
Really?
The original one, yeah.
Oh, we are special.
It's the first one. Never again.
Great. Thank you. And just can you, since you're up here, I guess, can you just clarify like what your vision is here of how this kind of a layout and design and approach will enhance, I think to quote the architect here, enhance the experience for dine-in patrons and really be a community-oriented focus of design.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a unique perspective because I'm also a partner on Bearded Brewer. So
Oh, okay.
I'm an owner on that. And the folks have just been so excited to walk over. The food trucks have been a huge hit. They're starving for something to do, a place to hang out.
Yeah.
And so I think even the way the garage door is situated with the way the wind comes kind of from the north, it's going to be a perfect patio, shaded a little bit in the afternoon. It's going to be a great hangout. So super comfortable seating. The build outs were done really, really well.
Great. Thank you. Good. I guess the one thing, I didn't bring a PowerPoint presentation this time as I did last week for the comprehensive plan, but I'll just refresh our memory of what's expected in a mixed neighborhood setting. And it's a mix of, so I'm reading from page 104 of Envision Longmont. The characteristics: provide residents with a mix of housing options and densities, encourage greater variety of housing types. We can kind of put that aside because it's about housing, and this is not that. Number 2, provide opportunities for residents to meet their everyday needs through proximity to compatible non-residential uses such as small shops, cafes, parks, recreation facilities, schools, or other community gathering places. This seems to slot very nicely right within that. Sounds like a coffee shop would very much fit that number 2 there. Number 3, typically within walking distance to additional services and amenities and public transit. Access is supported by a robust network of sidewalk, trail, or multi-use path connections. And serves as a transition between single-family neighborhood and higher density corridors, centers, and employment areas. From my reading of this largely fits very squarely in the intent there. I understand staff's recommendation on this. I understand the applicant's intention here. I have a few more questions about kind of some of the transportation access, but I'll reserve my time for now and see what my fellow commissioners want to ask.
Thank you. I do have a question about the right. Can you just go over the right of way? It looks like it goes from, it's not consistent. It's kind of slanted. And what is allowed to be built or put in that area? And what do you have to stay away from?
Sure. So within that easement, let me pull up the exact thing. So one of the biggest things is there are limitations on the types of landscaping. They don't want large trees. So the applicant did, I would say, a really good job of working within the acceptable tree list. There is a prescribed tree list that's part of the planning agreement with Northern Water. The biggest thing is avoiding vertical things. So some driveways would be fine. What they're showing is acceptable, and I do know the applicant did do some coordination with representatives of Northern Water as well.
So there's no problem with the drive-through?
No, we verified with Northern Water, had them review the site plans. The concrete flat work over the easement is acceptable, nothing with a foundation.
Thank you, Chair Poland. So I watched last month's meeting, which brings to some of these components. So I'm wondering, Planner Hewitt Apperson, if I could just get some clarification with you a little bit on the conditional use of this one. Sorry,
Sure.
not of, just based off, that's what my knowledge is coming from. So the the secondary use, when you do that calculation to 50%, right, for secondary use, you're taking those 3 lots for the 100%, right? Okay, and so that 50% comes out of those 3 lots.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then the conditional use, my understanding is the drive-through
Correct.
piece. Okay,
Yep, restaurants are
How
allowed
easy
by
that
right
was.
in this particular zone. It's
Okay.
the drive-through that kicks it to a conditional use.
excellent. Thank you so much. And I agree that they've done a great job with the drive-through, and I mean, I think it's sort of fortuitous about having that drainage easement there, sort of works in favor of that buffering for the drive-through on that corner. I too have lived in Boulder County my whole life, and I think it's pretty great to have coffee over there and local coffee over there. Is there a landscape representative here for the applicant? Does anyone want to try and answer those? I have a couple on the plan. It's okay if you can't, because they're not crucial, and I totally get it, and it's not crucial, so that's great. But I had just had a couple. There's on the landscape plan, there is, I don't know if it's a typo or not, but because the plants are so critical to this site, there's 3 on the, what plan do you have up? On the drainage easement on the southwest corner, not the larger one. The 3 trees there are not on this tree schedule, but there are 3 trees that are on the schedule that are not on the plan.
Being the 3 I'm highlighting with the mouse.
Yeah, so that, it's like TE or something, but it's not on the plant list. But on the plant list, there's 3 elms. I'm guessing that's what happened.
I believe so. I know that there was, I do remember there was an issue where what is identified in the Longmont land use code varied from what the acceptable plant list agreement was with Northern Water.
Okay.
And that the variance between them was due primarily to the naming features of the plants. Is that fair, Jennifer?
I think so. Yeah, there
Yeah.
was like varietals versus cultivars type deal.
Something along down the lines, not the genus, but maybe the species
Right,
or the
and-
cultivar. So still an elm, you
Still
think?
an elm, just
Because
yeah.
that's my main concern.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's really needled in right in those easements growing there. But if Northern Water doesn't have a problem with it, I'm okay. It just wasn't clear what was going in there.
Yeah, I do know that our landscape architect worked very, very closely with the Northern Water
Yeah,
people
I
to make
appreciate
sure
that.
that they got exactly what was in the agreed contract between Northern Water and Longmont.
Yeah, there were like 4 revisions on the plan. There was a lot
Yeah.
of due diligence done in that project, so I appreciate that. I think you guys did a great job. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I know it's
No.
tricky when it's not your plant, but I just wanted to clarify that. And then this one's going to be harder.
Okay.
When you look at this color rendering up here and
Sure.
you see the ADA accessible spot, right?
Yes.
You're right there?
Yep. Right.
Then
the
there's like a
AD
little bendy path, and on the landscape it's called cobblestones.
Yep.
So my concern is that and it's not on the grading plan, so it doesn't seem to be a swale, which is a depression. But my concern is because it intersects the grading plan perpendicularly from the site, that water could collect there and drain right into the ADA ramp. And they're not here. So I don't know if it's aesthetic, right? Or if it is part of the grading.
Unfortunately, I'm not
Yeah,
really able
okay.
to speak to that.
Okay.
The only thing I can speak to is I do know the grading and water flow, because of the location for the inlet and the existing underground water stormwater detention system all being in this northeastern corner, is all directed to the north and to the east. So everything is graded and sloped to those 2 directions.
Right.
In the inlet.
Then that swale
There
though,
as well.
that crosses right through it. So I'm concerned that it would collect it and then dump right into that ADA ramp.
I apologize.
Yeah.
I'm not able to really speak to
Okay.
that one.
Okay. I appreciate your honesty. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. You can sit down for a second. I just need to collect my thought first. Are there any other comments? Because I had another thought, but I just wanted to collect it for a second. Are there no one else? Anna, did you have something?
Commissioner Lukash?
Thank you, Chair. I echo some of the sentiments about having the coffee shop in this area. I think it's much needed along Airport Road, and I know it's a busy commuter route, so lots of people need their coffee in the morning. Let's see, I had two questions, and one, let's start with the sidewalk here and the connection of how the neighborhood connects to it. It looks like there's a connection from the south, but not a specific connection from the west, or at least it's not highlighted in this plan.
So I will see if, Josh, do you have information about that? My understanding is that would be related to the drainage easement that runs on that portion of the property, but our natural resources folks can speak to that a little better than I can.
Yeah, I mean, we see the cars coming through that
Yes.
area, and seems like the perfect spot for the folks that live to the west. That will be their entrance too, but it's not clear.
Good evening, Commissioners. Josh Sherman, Engineering Administrator with Public Works. What I can speak to with regard to the drainage easement is that that easement is there because there's underground detention. That's what's actually occupying that space. That underground detention area structure serves not just this lot, but all the commercial lots that front Airport Road there, so the two other additional lots to the south. This is their stormwater detention collection area for all of that, this larger commercial development area.
But we are paving parking spots, so.
Yes, so
Can we pave some
I
sidewalk?
was going to say, in terms of improvements on top of that easement, impervious area, pavement would be allowed, parking, sidewalks, et cetera. So I can't speak to necessarily why there's not a sidewalk, but I can tell you that from a drainage easement perspective, that's not restrictive.
So it's not restrictive, but there could be. Okay. And while you're there,
Sure.
my other question was about a connection to a transit. I know
Okay.
there's a route that goes in that area. Is it 324 or is it?
Good question. Actually, I don't know. Maybe somebody can look it up while we're up here. I don't know the
doesn't matter which one,
multimodal
but
and the bus routes in that area specifically. I do think there is a bus stop
There's a bus, yeah.
close.
And obviously this will connect commuters that go along 119, and there's that 119 project coming up. Is that in accordance with that project? Does it affect it anyway, or does it come in?
Are you speaking to the bus rapid transit
Ye-
project?
Yes.
Okay. And specifically, does what impact that, or how does that impact this?
The traffic study, for
Oh.
example.
The traffic study specifically for this site, which was really just a traffic memo,
Yeah.
is to show that it's in compliance with that original subdivision and that commercial subdivision for this area. So they did that analysis and showed that, yes, it is in compliance with the original study that was done with the anticipated traffic that was expected to be generated from that original study. So it is in compliance in that regard.
Okay. Good. That's what I wanted. Thank you.
Sure.
And maybe going back to the applicant on the issue of the sidewalk, is there a reason why there is no sidewalk on the west side? And would you be open to add a sidewalk there for folks in the neighborhood to access?
So I believe, I will let Brandon speak for himself on this, but I believe the short answer would be yes, we'll be open to anything that we need to do to make sure that the project moves forward. With that said, the original design intent was to ensure that we met the necessary standards, but also to be cognizant of the economic impact of the development, keeping it within a budget. So we met the requirement by providing connection, but did so to the existing sidewalk along the south side of the property. Since there's not an existing sidewalk running the entirety of the western length of the site, there would be a good deal of expense associated with to put in a new sidewalk running up to that and then make the connection. But if it's something that we need to do to ensure approval, then I think that was something that the developer would be open to doing as a condition of approval.
Yeah, okay, thank you, yeah. Would you like to come up and?
Yeah, I can come up. So I was just asking him.
And please state your name.
I'm
for the
sorry,
record.
Chris Niels. I'm with the landowner. Asking him, because of the northern water easement that runs north-south on the east side of the property, the building had to be moved farther left than it might otherwise be. And then in order to have a drive aisle, parking lanes, and landscaping, I was just asking Chad if there would even be enough room for a sidewalk with those site constraints, because you really can't shrink any of the things leading up to that tree lawn. So that was my question to him. I don't have any answers.
Anyone has the answer?
I mean, my recollection is, I think that is the answer, is the northern water easement does sort of shove everything to the west a bit. Ben Ortiz is not here, but he is, our Development Review Committee reviewer who really takes a look at the sidewalk connections and the, parking and all of that. It passed muster with him. I would defer to his judgment. But I do believe the northern water easement does contribute to that constraint.
Okay, yeah, again, you're proposing this, to the applicant, you're proposing this for the community, so there will be lots of folks coming in, even biking, right? They still need a safe place to access, and they might use sidewalk as their route, so some connection here would be needed. Thank you.
Commissioner Popkin.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to build on the direction that Commissioner Lukacs is going. I mean, if I am realistically living across Palladio Court there, I'm going to walk directly west to east. I'm not going to walk around and up as a U. And so I guess I just want to clarify, if we're talking about the right spot in terms of the easement there, like I think where Commissioner Lukacs was getting is the drainage easement on the south side of the entrance. That east-west entrance was being discussed, like, can we throw a sidewalk there? Is there any reason, and I'm just not clear from the conversation that happened, is that limited in a certain width or size? It doesn't look like that would impact the parking spaces to the north.
So to be clear, what you're proposing
Correct.
would be to put in a sidewalk basically right there.
Exactly.
Sure.
And on the southern corner.
And shift all of this landscaping and route it down to here.
Yeah, exactly. So that you could enter from the south side or from the west side, just based on that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people are just going to walk there anyway, and I foresee a conflict, especially with a location that is going both hybrid cafe and drive-through, with cars
Sure.
coming through and because that would be the way that they'd come out, right?
Like I say, I think that certainly adding sidewalk connection across this.
People are really
this
excited.
area
They've finally
would
gotten their coffee. They're ready to go, and then suddenly you have pedestrians trying to enter there from west to east.
Sure, and like I say, that would be something that I believe would be readily agreeable to. Yeah.
No.
Be something.
Thank you. So just to clarify, Commissioner Lukacs, we were talking about the west to east connection there. Right. Yeah. So I think we were just talking about that drainage easement thing that's labeled there from Palladio Court to the existing. Is that a crosswalk? What is that purple sparkly
It is,
line?
yeah. Right here is the crosswalk. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, exactly. So I'm thinking.
So just tying in here with a new sidewalk.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep. Great. And so it sounds like applicant has no issues with
No
that.
issues with that.
Great. Thank you. While you're up, that answers one of my questions. How did the applicant team, how did Ziggy's assess what the optimal level of bicycle parking was for this establishment, given that you're trying to make it a really community-centric opportunity and you have a bunch of residential of different scales and styles that are very easily within bike distance, as well as actually in a very fortunate position that both Clover Basin and Airport Road, if I recall correctly from my adventures, also have marked bicycle lanes, both west to east and north to south.
For the bicycle parking, we will typically try to ensure that we exceed the minimum standards
Okay.
requirement, but also minimize the amount that it takes away from the patio, because we always will try to locate the bicycle parking at or near.
That makes
as
sense.
Close as possible to the patio, and so that's how we came up with.
Got it. So then in this case, you're aiming for about
We'll
10% of the capacity
Uh,
of bike parking,
There
or maximum
is-
capacity, right? 4 to 40 something.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. A couple questions for staff. Jennifer, could you clarify for us what EV ready means in this context?
Sure. Basically, it means it may not have the plug ready to go, the plug in there where you can charge immediately, but the infrastructure will be in place so that you can add actual charging stations.
So like the electrical, the
Yeah.
wiring, the conduit
Yep.
would be there, but there wouldn't be a charging station there.
Correct, but
So
it
that-
could be added at some point.
But that would be at the applicant or the site owner's discretion,
Mhm.
right? And from your experience, have you, like, I'm looking at this in the context of we have a patio that's kind of like the buttress between the cafe and then the parking spaces. And I'm just curious, like, is the intention actually to build charging stalls there? Because that seems like it might detract from the fairly limited patio as we were just hearing as well.
So I'll be honest, this EV and EV ready space is, it's a very new requirement. So there was legislation passed at the state level requiring EV parking spaces, I believe,
you.
last session. So this is a new requirement, so it's hard to really say exactly how it's going to function, but the infrastructure is in place for additional EV spaces. So there would be that one easternmost space that's not accessible that would have a charging spot there. And then the others would basically, there would be the capacity to add that in the future.
So this is not just the applicant like toying with the concept. This is the applicant trying to meet requirements under state
Exactly.
law for this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those requirements have been incorporated into our code.
Good. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that
Yep.
for the public and for anyone who might be
Yeah.
looking to park there at some point and charge there.
This is a new standard that
Yeah.
we're all trying to figure out, so.
Great. And then, I was asking the applicant about how they thought about optimal level of bike parking. I think that's the only other sticking point for me here of, it seems as a community destination with some pretty good bicycle access already, that 4 spaces seems on the lower side for like a fairly large place-based cafe. It's not a huge deterrent in my, like, it's not, I don't have a visceral reaction to this proposal as a result of 4 parking spaces for bikes, but I'm curious, how does staff look at the number of bike parking that's appropriate? What's the code require? And then how do we determine that in the context of the multimodal transportation plan?
Sure, so, code does require that, bicycle parking spaces be equal to at least 5% of the total number of vehicular spaces provided, but not less than 1 bicycle rack. So each rack provides 2 spaces. So, in this particular case, I believe 1 would meet that requirement, 1 space, so they are providing ultimately space for 4 bicycles.
Okay.
So it is definitely in excess of what we require.
Okay. And then can you just refresh my memory just to get the broader context of the full multimodal transportation elements of this?
Sure, the full multimodal elements would be, pedestrian paths, the connection from the patio down to the Bramante Drive sidewalk. Again, you have your bicycle parking spaces, you have, again, those pedestrian connections that link up throughout the community, so.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. I don't have a problem with the proposal. I think the applicant has a good intention here. I think it makes a lot of sense for the space. It clearly aligns with the comprehensive plan. I appreciate the applicant's willingness to add in additional little sidewalk stretch to make that west to east connection much more reasonable there. I'd personally love to see a little bit more bike parking. It feels like for that destination that this is hopefully going to be, that would really enhance the feel. And then I guess I struggle slightly with this awesome layout that I have in front of myself, and then the size and rendering there. It just looks like that is not to scale in any way, shape, or form. So I guess my last question is like, how do I reconcile the fact that that building does truly look like it's 6, 7 parking spaces with what on here looks like it's almost a ballroom, like, or like a small ballroom? Like, is there something I'm missing about how that's set up? Because it feels like that is a pretty small structure, but this looks grand and wonderful. So I'm just trying to reconcile the scale there. Anyone from the applicant team can respond here. Like, how do I reconcile what looks like this is a very narrow thing that takes up, if you're looking at trying to superimpose the parking spaces on there, really 7-8 parking spaces total.
So again, if knowing that the building is 1,800 square feet,
Yeah.
the parking, standard parking stall, 9 foot wide, 20 feet deep. So it truly is 10 spaces. 10 spaces would equal out to 1,800 square feet.
Okay.
And
And it's just a creative layout lengthwise to fit in a good amount of people with a fairly narrow kitchen operation because it's just a bar.
It has a minimal back of house, a minimal barista line area. The efficiency works very, very well. Because of the relatively low occupant load, it only requires a single-use two single-use restrooms, one male, one female. So there's not a huge demand for that, allowing a large area of open dining.
Great. I appreciate that clarification because we got a couple of public comments that were just commenting on like
concerned about the,
and I just want to
relative
reassure,
size,
honestly reassure people that
And-
this actually is the cafe scale that Ziggy's intends it to be.
And what I didn't remember is if the plan in front of you, if it has dimensions on it, overall dimensions, and I don't remember off the top of my head. Do you remember the
It
out?
does for some of the spaces, not the overall, but it does for some of the spaces. I'll take your word for that on this.
30 by 60. So, 60 feet wide, so it'll be plus or minus, 7 stalls. 7
Gotcha.
stalls. So.
Just while I have you up there, and you guys can think about this, but I'd be curious, like, I appreciate how willing you were to add a small sidewalk stretch. Would there be meaningful concern if we were to, say, double the bike parking there as making it part of the community destination?
All right.
So, done this 20 years and watched habits, and we have a bunch of these stores. If we even have 8 of them, a lot of the folks are just taking their bike and they're just leaning up right against the table with them, and they got their helmet on and they're just hanging. So there's lots of places for them. They're leaning against the building. Even if we had them, they honestly don't use them very often. They want them close to them because I think they're really expensive, and they have them next to their seats. So,
So you
certainly the bike rack's very affordable. It's gonna take a little space, and if we get open and people are wanting more of those, it's really easy. It's a couple $100 to put one in, no big deal. Just people just don't really use them as much as you'd think.
Got it. Okay.
Cool.
I must be an anomaly. Cool. Well, thank you for clarifying that. Brandon, right?
Brandon.
Yes. Cool. It seems like you're trying to optimize for the patio space as well, which is a key amenity for this kind of establishment. Understood. I'll reserve my time. Thank you.
Commissioner Saunders.
Thank you, Chair. Did you want to go first, Jerry, because you didn't have a chance to talk yet? I'm happy to switch. Okay. I'm going to go for it then. Okay. All right. Maybe it's big. My softball questions are over. So, okay. So, when I look at this project and I go against the criteria 6 for the multimodal accessibility, I see this site is built for cars, right? Because it has the drive-through, right? And we heard earlier about the great accessibility of cars, which we don't hear all the time. So I appreciate that input. We also know that cars are a huge contributor of emissions of greenhouse gas, right? So the standard is 30% of greenhouse gas. But that's all of transportation, right? So that's planes and trains. So cars are only half of that. So they're like 16% of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. That being said, the charge for us is to look at compatibility of a site. We're not really here for QC, although that happens sometimes when we see mislabeled plants. You heard me speak positively about, local businesses and that side of town needing a coffee shop and how great that's going to be for everyone. I do share the same stumbling blocks, if you will, about accessibility. I have the same challenges about the bike rack, because this is really seems like for cars, not for pedestrians, which is one of the criteria for the secondary use. Being that it's smack dab in the middle of all of these neighborhoods, right? And so I think that the standard is too low for 5% of parking in our code, but that's not for me to say. I really am trying to get to the intent, because that's my position on the board, is the intent. If that is compatible to the criteria of the multimodal, which I don't think it does, but I do think, Mr. August, I appreciate what you said. What'd you say? Oh, that we're happy to maybe make some adjustments to see this project go forward. And I'm hearing from my fellow commissioners, more bike racks would be preferable to less. So I have a family of 5 at my house, and if I was going to meet some of our friends in Renaissance, we like to ride our bikes, it's only going to be us. And we're not going to be able to have our friends ride our bikes there, but they won't have anywhere to lock them up. And I disagree a little bit with Mr. Brandon. All due respect, I'm not sure that we would keep our bikes next to our table, especially if we have a trailer with them. You guys are familiar with Cycle Hops up the street? Do you know what their restaurant capacity is? Does anybody have a guess? Inside? Outside? Anybody want to take a guess? Okay, so what you're saying on this property is that the indoor seating is 30 to 40 and outdoor seating is also 30 to 40? Is that what I was getting? Because if you look at the plan that we have, you have 35 to 40 seats inside, the one that we were given.
Right.
Okay.
The plan that you have?
Not the handed out one. I can't remember which sheet it was.
But the plan and the stated plan is there's 43 interior seats.
Okay.
It was identified in the
Yeah.
thing 40 to 45.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah.
yes, you are correct on that. The patio seating
Yeah.
will probably be more likely 15. It's
okay.
roughly a 750 square foot patio.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
was like. What?
yeah.
40 outside?
No,
That's
they're
not gonna fit.
definitely not that
Okay.
many outside.
Okay.
Which is back to the previous point, is the other reason we're trying to minimize the amount of space that is taken up on the patio with features other than what can be, than what presents the greatest use to the greatest number of people from their findings. But
So the penciling out of this is more towards cars and parking and driving. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I don't believe that that's necessarily the case. It's, it is a drive-through coffee operation.
Sure.
It is designed to provide convenient and fast delivery of
Yeah.
coffee products to people. That is the intent of the drive-through specifically. The cafe and patio portion is designed, as Brandon said, to create a communal hangout spot. They're two separate
Okay.
issues.
I'll buy that for $1. So then there's 17 parking spaces, including all the EV, including the ADA, right?
I believe that is
Okay.
correct, yes.
And that is hitting our maximum,
Yes.
right? And that has switched, because they used to be minimums, right? And now we're maximums. So the intent that I gather from that change is that we're trying to decrease parking in Longmont, right? So I'm wondering if you're amendable to taking out some of these westerly spots for bike and or for that sidewalk.
We had removed a number of the western spots already. Again, we are definitely agreeable to putting in the sidewalk connection. I believe we could certainly add some, an additional concrete pad here where an additional bike rack could be added, because it's inexpensive, and if that
Right.
satisfies, to provide some additional bike storage. I believe we would be less agreeable to removing any more parking than what we have already removed, because there is still the desire to bring people in and have them in the cafe portion of the facility.
Well,
to
sure,
have
they
them have a
can
place
ride
to
their
park.
bike still. So like it's
Yeah,
not precluding them if you have a car or a bike. Like you can't. It
Sure.
doesn't stop you from coming. But if
Right.
you only have 4 bike racks and you want to lock your bike up, you do. You have to bring it in with you, or you have to lean it against the building, or you just don't go.
But for the area of flat work with the new concrete sidewalk, we could certainly add some additional concrete flat work in this landscaping area, right? You know, if we put a sidewalk across here,
With
put
the
in some
parking,
concrete
yeah,
flat
or the-
work here
yeah,
for a
the
bike
bike.
rack, certainly.
I'm hearing that because I don't want to take away tabletops. I'm not
Right.
I'm not at all trying to take that away because I think that's going to be
Yeah.
beautiful
The-
and amazing. I do feel like, and you definitely are within code, and I commend you for that because this is a tricky site. But the intent, if I showed this to my students and I just said, what is the intent of this multimodally? What transportation is this catering to? Is it pedestrian friendly? It's not. It's missing the connection on the west side, and it has 4 bike things. So like for me, that's just my family. I can't go ride bikes with other families, and it's beautiful out there, you guys.
Right, no, understood.
And it's already so heavy with, drive-throughs are, and I think we all know this, so I don't feel like I'm calling anything out, but drive-throughs, they're 4 cars, right? And so that's just bringing more cars to that area. And that traffic study, you can see that because the traffic study just did the restaurant, even though it was twice the size. And then you do half the size of the restaurant, but the traffic is still quite high, even though the restaurant's smaller. Do you see what I'm saying? And this is a neighborhood center, so I'm not seeing quite yet that compatibility for the multimodal criteria. Is we decided the bus line is up on Nelson, right? It doesn't come down Airport, or it does come down Airport. Does it come all the way down? Oh, okay, so it hits Clover Basin.
I believe this is the bus stop here. I believe
Oh, thank you.
that's the
Okay.
bus stop right there.
Perfect. Excellent. So hitting that. Great. So I want to let the rest of the commissioners have a chance, but with conditions, I do think, we can go ahead. For me, my vote would be with some of the conditions, and we can spell those out later about the sidewalk and the increase in bike parking. But I would like to see a little bit, decrease on the parking spaces. 1 or 2 spaces to come down and swap that out for some green space on this highly multimodal wheeled transportation. But I'm going to go ahead and let some of the commissioners who haven't had a chance to speak first, if that's all right.
Okay.
I think Jeremy has something to say.
Thank you. I don't have my bat signal quite back from missing last month. And good evening, Commissioners. Jeremy Terrell, Assistant City Attorney. I just want to refresh and provide some general thoughts about conditions. Under 1502.040, am I actually in? Yeah, that's where I'm at. Subsection N2. This pertains to conditions of approval by deciding or decision-making bodies, which again, Planning and Zoning Commission is the decision-making body for this particular application. Conditions approval shall be reasonably related to the anticipated impacts of the proposed use or development and shall be based upon adopted standards. Adopted standards isn't defined in that section, but I think I would refer back to Land Development Code standards, which again, as I believe the applicant or Ms. Hewitt-Apperson pointed out, there is that 5% of parking for bicycle parking requirement. So I would just note that the applicant is within the required 5% bicycle parking. And any condition approval has to be based off adopted standards. I want to note that. And then there was the one comment about maximum parking. That was only the change for the parking requirement was only for residential uses. Commercial has had maximum parking for a long time now, not minimum. So the minimum to max only was residential change. That brought back nightmares, so I just wanted to add that when I was thinking about it.
Grab the intent of
Yep.
Yep. Thank you, Jeremy.
So, thanks, Chair Poland.
Just clarifying that it's the bus stop.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Boone.
Thank you. So see if I wait long enough, some of my questions get answered. That is the bus stop over there on the east side. So I have a couple of comments relative to sidewalks, and I think that with the bus stop right there, there actually ought to be a pathway from the bus stop into the site. And I think if you don't provide one, that people will make one.
The primary reason that we did not put a direct sidewalk connection here, there was twofold, actually. One is to deter people from pedestrians entering into what was a vehicle-heavy use coming in. The second is the existing grading and drainage pattern for that has a swale that runs down that creates grading difficulties to get a accessible sidewalk crossing across, which is why we tied into the existing that is already ADA compliant.
Yeah, it's quite a walk going from the bus stop to or from the cafe, which is unfortunate. A good example, well, this is a totally different kind of example, but I think of the pathways up on the CU campus that were made by students because they didn't want to go around corners, and so they made pathways across the shortest distance to where they were going, and it seems like that's going to happen here. And with a swale or not a swale, I think people will still go across there. So that's just a comment. The other comment about a sidewalk on the other side, are we creating a problem by having people from this housing development to the west running across the street mid-block to get to the sidewalk that's on the other side? You know, that could be a problem. It's not that far down to the corner, and it seems like it would certainly be safer to not have the sidewalk there. Just a comment. And with respect to bicycle parking, I can't ride a bike anymore, but I certainly do think that that's important, especially for this kind of a coffee shop. I was just down at Ziggy's yesterday downtown, hung out there for, I don't know, 2.5 hours. And there were bikes all over the place. And you do have bicycle racks there, maybe not enough, because people were being creative with where they were chaining up their bicycles. And I would certainly be in favor of losing one vehicular parking space for some more bike parking. But as you said, Jeremy, you know, it is within the code standards, so, you know, I don't know what we could do condition-wise with respect to that. And aside from those few comments, I think it's a great project. I think the presentation was really nice. I think the neighborhood will love it, and I know I will use it. And I appreciate the time you put into it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to give my 2 cents. In looking at this overall, and because of the way that it had to be built to do the drive-through, it really does preclude having sidewalks coming in from either the north side or the west side. I could see that would be, I can see somebody, as she said, somebody's going to make a path from the north side. But I can also see the fact that you don't want to put a sidewalk that has to cross the drive-through. And I also understand, I do agree with the fact that you have a sidewalk at the apartments on the west side, but then you have parking spaces. And where we're considering making a condition to put a sidewalk, you're going to encourage people to go on the sidewalk by the apartments, then walk through the parking spots, even though they're vertical, horizontal, whatever the way that they're stationed to where the sidewalk is, they're going to walk along parking spots, but they're going to walk along the parking spots, go across the street to get to a sidewalk if we put it there, rather than going down, I don't know, was that 50 feet to cross at the corner where there's a sidewalk and the sidewalk goes on. That sidewalk's really going to be for the people coming, for the most part, from those apartments and from the neighborhoods, even west and to the south of that. So I'm really not in favor of putting a sidewalk in there. I'll leave that up to the commission. As far as extra bike spaces, bike racks, I think that with the 4 there, and I'll leave it up to the developer. I would prefer to leave it up to the developer whether or not that they see something in the future where they say, oh boy, we are having a lot of bikes. We can throw up a couple more. It's easier to put something in. It's easier to put those racks in afterwards than put them in and say, geez, nobody's using them. That could be green space. I'd rather leave that up to them. And if things warrant down the road, that they can go ahead and put them in. So that's where I'm standing. I think this is well thought out. It's one of these dichotomies now. People are calling to have a drive-through in that area. So yes, it is going to be car-centric because that's really what people are really wanting. Secondary, I think really the secondary use is the dining in use. That's secondary to having the drive-through. So for transportation modal, it does support the fact that area is calling to have a drive-through and people are going to use it for cars. You know, we heard the public even say the people in the apartments are going to work. They're not going to walk over, have a coffee, walk back to their house. They're going to get in their car, go through the drive-through, get their coffee, and drive to the office. That is a use case that I can really see, probably even more so than somebody walking there in the morning. So for multimodal, it fits in the area. They're using the existing sidewalk. Unfortunately, because of the layout, they really can't have a sidewalk coming from the north or coming from the east. But I get that because of the drive-through, and you know, I would not want to see a sidewalk cutting across the drive-through like that. So given all those constraints, I think this is well thought out. I think it's what this area needs, and I'm in favor of it the way that it is planned out. Commissioner Popkin.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate those comments. Appreciate Commissioner Boone's comments, Commissioner Saunders' comments in this. I share a lot of Commissioner Saunders' thoughts around, you know, how do we overall think about the sustainability of this kind of a proposal. I actually think the very nature of the project is aimed at creating more closer networks by being more proximate to existing residential. That in of itself reduces emissions, reduces vehicle trips, reduces the length of vehicle trips. So when we are thinking about the transportation sustainability of it, I actually do see this kind of thing as being very productive and sustainable in that sense. You know, we can, you know, I think we could probably go back and forth on what the optimal level of cars are, but I think that one is a little bit stretching our purview and or parking spaces, and frankly this is allowed as a use, and I see this as a reasonable use in this kind of area. I disagree pretty heavily with Chair Poland on the use of that sidewalk. I think when one of the opportunities of the, and I appreciate the applicant's very ready willingness to include that little strip along that drainage area or drainage easement area. The reason I think it's important here is, one, this is not a, you know, it's kind of looks like it's a 2-lane road there. It's not. It is just like a driveway with some parking off of it as a street. It is not designed for heavy vehicular flows. It will certainly get a little bit of traffic once there's a coffee shop that's a regional destination, but it is not a major through street there. I'm less familiar with what the road on the south side of this on Bramante Drive is. Jennifer, are you able to clarify, is that a full through road? Like, are we expecting more people to come in through on Bramante Drive or through that little like parking stretch next to the residential?
So looking at the aerials, the aerial maps for this area, Bramante Drive definitely is a wider roadway. And given that there is that kind of pork chop median at airport, it's clearly intended to take two-way traffic, I would say. Again, it's also,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a private drive, much like Palladio, but it seems to be designed to be more of a through connection as opposed to serving the apartment complex.
Thank you, Jennifer. The other reason I think maybe the chair is perhaps misguided in his approach here is that there's no entryway from the north for reasons we've already discussed, or from the east. And so really the only walkway entrance is from the south. And the issue is that there's actually the advantage of the location here from the applicant standpoint, from the community standpoint, is that it's actually, these are 3-story apartments or condos. I don't know if they're for sale or for rent, but 3-story residential units that are adjacent to this site and are for multiple blocks. So you actually have a higher density of people flow that's located next to this, and they'll come from the south side. They'll come up from the area that's below the architectural site plan here, but they'll also come around from the north because there are multiple units there, and they will cross and form whatever path they want. And the way that the current design beautifully looks is there's this landscape buffer that's going to basically funnel people to where one of the major car outlets is. And so I think you want to give, I think it would behoove us from a safety standpoint, and just helping to visually direct pedestrians to get them onto that one space that we've already talked about. I think people will cross regardless, and we should give them literally a concrete place to cross. Yeah, there we go, a little materials pun there. I think it would be a missed opportunity to not put a small sidewalk in there. The applicant doesn't have any concerns with that. If the chair is opposed to that as a condition, I hope the applicant will just generally consider it, because it seems to make sense as a connective point to the property. I think the app, when you get to a site that's this small in terms of number of parking spaces and the required bicycle parking, it gets hard, in my opinion, to determine what the exact number is. I appreciate the applicant's willingness to consider adding more bike parking when that is, or if that's deemed appropriate. I think there's also a bit of a field of dreams concept here of if you build it, they will come. As in, if you have more obvious bicycle parking, it will encourage people and visually encourage them to show up in that mode. So I would look favorably upon, I would also be in favor of adding a little bit more bicycle parking, but not necessarily in lieu of any of the other parking that the applicant deems necessary for this. So that's my position on this. I think this project makes a ton of sense. It's funny, we're focusing on a few small pieces of this to really think about what's the best way to make this a community destination. And I think that's the applicant's intent. I think that's most of the commissioner's spirits here and intent behind some of the questions. I think it would enhance it and maybe mitigate a few of the pedestrian vehicle bike conflicts if we can help direct some of the pedestrian flows a little bit more intentionally. But otherwise, I see virtually entire merits to the proposal.
Commissioner Saunders.
Thank you, Chair Pullen. Planner Hewitt Apperson, I have a quick question for you about sidewalks. So the Palladio Street, is that a collector arterial? Do we have what
It's
that
a private drive.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, so Palladio and Bramante are both private
For
drives.
who owns them? What
The Renaissance.
Okay, the whole community.
Yeah.
And so what then is the code about having sidewalks along private drives? I guess there isn't one. You don't.
I'm not aware that there is one. Josh, do you?
No, there's no requirement to have a sidewalk. Okay. Yeah, I agree with, almost gave him a pay raise, Commissioner Popkin, about the goat paths is what we refer to them, where people just do their own path work. And so I hate to see this beautiful landscape get worked over. And I do think it's difficult for the secondary use for me because one of the reasons for secondary use in another property we had was that people are working from home now. And so I think about the apartment complexes, the single family, it's all neighborhood. And I think about the walkability in this neighborhood is not to, it doesn't hit that compatibility standard in the criteria for me. I think it's 6. The applicant includes an appropriate transportation plan, including multimodal transportation access, and is integrated and connected where appropriate with adjacent development through street connections, sidewalks, trails, and similar features. So I think it's a great project. The sidewalk is getting to me, the types of multimodal is getting to me. So I don't think that it hits this criteria for me, unless there were some better sidewalks. I mean, I know I'm shooting the moon with the bikes. I'm just trying, to get that intent of, if you build it, they will come. If you make parking spaces, they will park. If you make biking racks, they will, I think, come too. And I feel that's the intent in the way that we're going. So, but I get, you guys did your job in due diligence doing it to the criteria, except for this number 6, including the street connection, the sidewalks and similar features, because we've noted several, so it's not just me, we've noted several access points for this community that are question marks, like where are they going to come through? If we're already building it knowing the goat paths are going to be there, is that really building it to pedestrian access, which this says that it is, that it's pedestrian access, but I'm not quite seeing it, not with there's nothing for the bus stop, which it's great that you lucked out on having a bus stop right there. So yeah, I'm just not seeing it there, so the conditions would need to be added there for me to approve, but I don't have a motion ready for that, so I'm going to let someone else talk.
Commissioner Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I ride bikes. I don't see an issue with the proposed spaces for bikes. I think Brandon makes a good point. In Boulder County, people aren't riding Schwinn's for the most part. They're riding thousands of dollars of bikes. It's sick how much money's out there riding bikes. So yeah, most people don't carry, I'm speaking from experience and watching people, they don't carry locks, they don't carry ways to secure their bikes. They just keep them close to them when they're grabbing a latte or whatever. So that to me doesn't concern me too much. I wanted to ask about the drive-through and kind of the way it wraps around the building and the parking spots. Do you have any concerns? I noticed you got like a double drive-through and then it kind of blends into one, kind of like Chick-fil-A does, McDonald's. Do you have any concerns of cars backing up and then blocking in cars that are pulled up to the spaces right in front of on the south side of the building there? Is that a concern?
We've done, as Brandon had noted, there are multiple Ziggy's locations nationwide. We've done we call it a Y lane, the 2-into-1, in numerous instances of these, always successfully. So no, I don't have a concern of that.
Okay.
What they will typically do is during slower times, or if it's not in use, they'll cone it off and restrict it to one, but it's there and available if there's heavier demand to help ensure that cars don't overstack.
Okay.
And from the projects that we've done, we've found 12 to 15 car stack is what really makes sure that it accommodates their business operations. And so that was another driving factor in having the second lane, is to ensure that we had adequate stacking available for busy times without it spilling outside of the lane.
I can add some more comments to that.
And Brandon can address that.
Yeah.
One of the things about this that we're, you know, where you get into trouble with these is if you put the menu board too far back, that's when they'll kind of pile back, I think maybe blocking those parking spots. We've moved that menu board up, 4 or 5 cars, so that there is that chance when school gets out is what would be the most concerning is when you kind of have that rush of cars. And so it just gives a lot of opportunity for a lot of cars to stack and still not quite be at the menu board yet. The other thing that's really nice is we'll be outside with, just like Chick-fil-A and things like that, with order takers and iPads, things like that, to push people through pretty quickly.
Nice. Okay.
And then on the parking, I just want to add one more comment on this. We'll have at peak hours 6 to 8 employees there, and during the day, if they have a mid shift, they could park potentially over at a different spot. But for me, we have hired a lot of young people, and I want them really close to the building. So there'll be as much as 10 people working at a time for those after school and before school rushes. So they'll take up a lot of that parking, and I need them close for safety reasons.
Sure. No. While you're up here, Brandon,
Yep.
did you consider at all that property to the south of here, that's to the south of Bearded Brewer? Obviously, that wouldn't work from a driving perspective, but did you consider that just as like a standalone kind of Main Street kind of layout, or?
We have, we've only, in our 20 years, only closed 3 locations. All of those are cafe-only locations.
Interesting.
Main Street's doing okay right now, but it's kind of a legacy play for us. It's where we grew up. It was our first store, and it's kind of why we keep it rolling. It's kind of our community service project, if you will. So without a drive-through, it's just not a very sustainable business model.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you could probably have a little overflow parking down there too, just to the west of the Bearded Brewer, I guess, if you had to,
Well, that's the
right?
nice thing is I won't complain about people overflow parking because that's our business too, right? So
Yeah.
if they need to park over there, they can. I think that's okay
Okay.
with you. Okay.
That's good to know. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to make a couple comments here, follow up. So for the multimodal, and once again, this is going to be, it is for a drive-through. To really get it so that it is more for pedestrians, you would almost have to take the drive-through out. It's one of those you do, because to be really multimodal, you would want something either coming from the north or something coming from the bus stop. You would want to put something in there, but because of the way the drive-through is, it precludes having those kind of paths. There is probably going to be what you call a go path coming from the north, probably from the northwest section. People are probably going to cross over there, walk through the grass, walk through the parking lot to get in. That's why I think putting the sidewalk in isn't going to get you too much, because if somebody's coming from the north side, from the northwest side, they're not going to walk down to the entrance and walk across the sidewalk. They're just going to go across, walk through the parking lot, and go through that way. It's not a deal breaker for me, but it's putting something in that I don't think is going to get as much use as what we think it might get useful. And as I said, for the multimodal, for me, this really is, if you're going to do a drive-through, it's going to preclude having some walkability. It's a give and take in this configuration. It's a give and take. You have to give up some of the walking to be able to put in the drive-through. If you want more of the walking, then you are going to be interfering with the drive-through. You're going to have people walking across paths that the drive-through is going through. That's the way I look at it. So I like the plan the way it is. I wouldn't be put off if there was multiple people who wanted to put in that sidewalk. I just don't think it's going to be as impactful as some people think it is. It's not a misguided thought. It's just my opinion. So that's where I'm at, and looking forward to hear from other people. Commissioner Saunders.
Thank you, Chair Pullen, but I think Commissioner Popkin was first. Oh, goody. Okay. Well, I disagree with Chair Pullen respectfully, although I appreciate his comments. So what I'm hearing is if we want it to be more community-based, then we should deny the drive-through, which I'm not thinking that's a great idea. I like the drive-through. I think it is great on the airport. I think that it hits those needs of the community. I am seeing for the and hearing about the multimodal use of this site. If you have a car And if you have a really expensive bike, then you can go to Ziggy's. And I don't think that's what Ziggy's wants, right? I think it's a great place. I know the one on Quail, drove by it every day, 3 times a day for 6 years, and it's a hop-in place. But it's in a community, right? It's also near light industrial, and it's right across from the bus stop. But those parents walking their kids to and from school, they show up, right? They come to that walk-up window and they buy their lattes. They are walking there. So I do think that walking safety is important. I do think when we start saying they're going to walk there anyways, well, then we need to make it safe. And so I am going to move approval with the condition of the sidewalk from Palladio to the connecting pedestrian crosswalk. Do you know what I'm saying? That right there, right along the drive of, so it'd be the north of that drainage easement, the north of the
Right, so
underground
you're talking
drainage.
going from Clover Basin down to the entranceway along Palladio Court on the east side of Palladio Court?
No, I would
Oh.
like the one from Clover Basin, but everybody's saying that's not gonna work. But at
Okay.
the very least, it should be the Palladio Court, going east-west.
Oh, okay.
Palladio
okay.
Court
That-
into the
yeah.
site. Are you
Okay.
seeing, we'd already talked about doing
Yep.
that, right? Can it go on top of that drainage easement? Because it's the underground drainage. I'm thinking it can, but I'm not totally sure. Yeah, okay. I mean, I would prefer the Clover Basin one go all the way down to that entrance, but again, I mean, that's threading the needle unless we move all the stuff around, but that's not for me to say. So my motion is to approve with conditions of putting in the sidewalk from Palladio Court on the north side of the underground drainage.
Do we have a second to that motion? Commissioner Popkin?
I'll second that.
Oh, wait, okay,
I'll second that.
thank you. We have the motion, we have a second discussion. Commissioner Lukash?
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate the discussion about the addition of the sidewalk, and I'm in favor of approving the site with the conditions, the condition about adding the sidewalk. Again, meeting the criteria number 6, I think it needs more connection, so at least we can do, it looks like, is to add that strip over there, since we can add one from the north or from the east, from the bus stop. So I think even in the future, whatever plans come to us, it should be considered by applicants and by staff to make sure that condition is not heavily met necessarily, but it has more connections than just one pedestrian entrance there. And a couple of days ago, I went and serviced my car, and while I was waiting, I was looking for a cafe, and I found a Ziggy's, which was the only cafe on a 1 mile radius. And I think it looks just like the plan here inside, and there was plenty of space for people inside, and for the barista area and all that. So I think, I know it looks small on the map, but I think it can work. I can't talk about how the drive-through was there because I didn't partake in that. But I appreciate the condition about the sidewalk.
Commissioner Popkin?
Thank you, and I appreciate the chair's clarifications on his previous intent, and will rescind the suggestion that he was misguided in any way, shape, or form. I want to just make a comment because I'm hearing people speculate about exactly how people are going to use this site. And I think if anyone knows best, it would be the applicant who has prepared, studied, planned, and runs this business in terms of who might use it at what times of day, in what types of modes. And so I think it's, we run the risk of projecting our own personal experience on how it might actually be used at certain times or with certain modes. And rather than thinking about what the intent from the applicant is at this community-oriented site, and as we've heard from a set of public comments as well, there are multiple different ways people can access this as a result of how the applicant has designed that. So I think it would behoove us to not make assumptions on how people will or will not necessarily lock their bikes, or when they will or will not get coffee, whether they will be walking over or driving through. And so making sure that this, I think the applicant rightly brings forward a proposal that allows for a multitude of uses. And I think where the tension is a little bit here is just exactly how people are going to access the site. And I think it behooves us to focus on that access point, not exactly how they're going to use the site. What we do know is the applicant fully intends to make this a destination, right? Both as a drive-through destination and for community and dine-in purposes. And I think that's really important to acknowledge. I think that the condition that Commissioner Saunders offered here that we had previously talked about with the applicant makes a ton of sense here, at least to direct some pedestrians. If it directs enough, that would be meaningful in my book, even if it doesn't direct all of them. And hopefully that would reduce the impacts to the other landscape that the applicant would be investing in as well. So I think there's a multi-pronged benefit of that. I too would like to see a few more transportation connections from the north and the east, but I think we're seeing why that would be a little bit problematic and potentially in conflict with the drive-through intent as well. So, if you're taking the bus all the way here already and you're getting off, a few extra steps there probably won't preclude you from going to that destination. And I think adding that west to east sidewalk does help a little bit with the cut through, at least from a behavioral sciences standpoint of people leaving the site and trying to decide if they're going northwest or wherever. So I think that's a reasonable addition. I guess I would personally love to see a little bit more bike parking on the sites, but I think that the applicant has heard the discussion and will be closely monitoring that. Perhaps as a suggestion, but not as an additional condition, the applicant could consider building that sidewalk or that concrete pad across that space to potentially accommodate a future additional bike parking without detracting from any intentional landscaping or other parking spaces or from the patio space. So hopefully the applicant will take that under advisement, but I don't see the need to require that as a condition for my approval. I am in support of Commissioner Saunders' motion per my second before. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will go ahead and I'll be for this. While I'm not really convinced yet that sidewalk is necessary, is not a deal breaker, and as long as the applicant is okay with it, I'll be okay with it. So that's where I'm at. Commissioner Lang.
Real quick on the future developed stuff to the south there. What will that look like when it's all said and done? Is that just going to be grassy area like it is today? Is it going to be like a gravel, I don't know, anything, or is it just going to kind of be left as is?
Currently, the landscape plan shows for it to be native seeded. I believe, is that? Yeah, native seeding for it. So it'll be grassy area like it is now until it's eventually developed.
Okay, any other comments? If not, Jane, let's go ahead and take a vote.
Commissioner Saunders?
Yes.
Commissioner Lang? Aye. Commissioner Boone? Aye. Chair Poland? Aye. Sorry, Commissioner Lukacs? Aye. Commissioner Popkin? Aye. Chairman, that passes 6-0.
Thank you very much. This item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by the City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the City Clerk's office and the Planning Office within the 7-day appeal period. The appeal period begins Thursday, July 18th at 8 a.m. and ends Wednesday, July 24th at 5 p.m. Let me get back to my other screen. Okay, that is it for our public hearing items. Thank you, applicant, for your presentation. Next is final call invited to be heard. This is a chance for anybody in the audience who would like to speak about an item that was not on the agenda for today. There's nobody signed up, and seeing nobody come forward, I'll go ahead and close out. Final call invited to be heard. Items from the commission. I will start this off by letting everyone know that earlier today we got a notification from Commissioner Flagg that due to medical reasons that she is going to be stepping down from the commission. So we will be running short one commissioner for a short while. I've already thanked her for her service, and I would hope that at some point in the future we can have a little presentation for her. Anybody else? Commissioner Lukash.
Thank you, Chair. And I have a personal update as well. I was awarded a scholarship with the University of New Mexico for a PhD in civil engineering, hoping to make future engineers design better for pedestrians and bicyclists. And with that comes a research position as well with the Center for Pedestrian and Bicyclist Safety at the University of New Mexico. That being said, most of my time will have to be in person in New Mexico while I'm not giving up my residency in Longmont yet. That is to be determined, with my family later on. I will have to resign as well from the commission because I will not be able to participate in the future meetings. And I know we have our bylaws of how many consecutive meetings we can miss. So it is with a heavy heart because I've been here since 2019, started as an alternate. So now there's a time for the alternates to step up and have a full-time chair here. Full-time position if you desire, but I encourage you to do so. I enjoyed my time with fellow commissioners, new and seasoned, and I will miss you dearly. And I don't know what's going to be in 4 years when I'll be graduating, but you never know. I might be back.
Well, I thank you, Commissioner Lukash, and thank you for your service. It's been enjoyable working with you and an honor. Commissioner Saunders.
Thank you, Chair Poland. Congratulations. That is amazing, and thank you for all your hard work on walkability, and I can't wait to see what happens next. They're lucky to have you. Stay in touch. Call us. Come talk. Yes. Thank you. Good job.
Commissioner Popkin.
I will just echo that sentiment. Congratulations, Commissioner Lukacs. We will miss you. We will miss Commissioner Flagg as well. I guess people are just trying to create some distance here between me and the chair. So try not to take it personally. No, I hope Commissioner Flagg is doing all right, all things considered, and that you enjoy this new journey. So thank you.
And I will grant, I guess this will be a decision on whether or not we're going to try to backfill these before the end of the term. I know Commissioner Flagg was term limited. Her term was coming to a conclusion anyways this year. Given the time of year, I don't know if it makes sense for us to try to fill the position, but.
Yeah, with all the head shaking you saw, I'm going to guess probably not.
Yeah. Okay. Any other items from the commission? Seeing none, Commissioner Rodriguez, or Council Member Rodriguez is not here. Items from Planning and Service Director Grant Penland.
Chair, members commission, again, congratulations. Just a quick update. We don't have anything slated for August at this time, but we still do have a couple weeks to make that determination. So hopefully we'll let you know within a week or two if we do have a meeting in August.
Thank you very much. And seeing all that, we are now in adjournment.